Hi, welcome to the show. My name is Jesse Goldberg, and this is part 2 of the Ken Scott Show. And my co-host here is Brian Cumming.
Hello.
Who's going to ask all the intelligent questions, and I'm going to ask the stupid questions. But Ken, to recap, Ken worked with the Beatles as everything, as an engineer, and then as now he works as a producer with David Bowie and who else?
Let's take that a step at a time.
What?
The story of how he got.
I'm recapping.
Well, he hasn't got the first.
We've only spoken about the Beatles so far. So.
Oh, okay.
So
let's talk more about the Beatles.
How did we get to David Bowie, and what did that do for your reputation?
I had left Abbey Road Studios. That was still EMI at that time, but left them and gone to work at a studio called Trident, which was an up-and-coming independent studio in London. It was the first studio that had 8-track in London. And a week after I started there, this young artist recorded one Saturday a song called Space Oddity with one of the owners of the studio, Barry Sheffield, engineering it, and Gus Dudgeon, who later went on to produce Elton as the producer. Well, that became fairly successful, and as I was now working there and Barry wanted to get out of it, I was put on as engineer for the album, which initially was called Man of Words, Man of Music, then came out as David Bowie, then finally I think was re-released as Space Oddity. Then that doesn't do much. 6 months later, as was the way at that time, David came in to finish off another album because I'd worked with him before. I was put on it, and this was both of these were with a producer called Tony Visconti, an American producer that was working over there all the time. And once again, the album did nothing, and David sort of disappeared for a bit. And all this time I'm going on, I'm working on All Things Must Pass, and my experience with David on the first 2 albums, I thought he's a very nice guy. He's obviously got a certain amount of talent, but a superstar? No, he's never going to really make it. Then, sometime later, David comes in to produce a friend of his, and just a single. And because I'd worked with David in the past, I was put in the sessions. Well, by this time, I wanted to move into production. I wanted more artistic say about what was going on. And during one of the tea breaks, Dave and I were talking, and I happened to mention that I wanted to move into production. And he said, well, I've just signed a new management deal. They're putting me into the studio to record a new album. I was going to produce it myself, but I don't think I can. Will you co-produce it with me? Well, of course I'm going to say yes immediately. Here's this person that is slightly talented, but no one's going to hear the album, so I can make as many mistakes as I want to. Unlike working with the Beatles when I first start, everyone gets to hear my mistakes. It's perfect. It comes round my house a couple of weeks later with his wife and his publisher, and we're going through material for the album, and that's when suddenly the fear set in, because I realized, hang on, this guy is a hell of a lot better than I realized, and he could actually happen. And so suddenly it was, there may be more people hear my mistakes yet again. And that led to Hunky Dory, which when it first came out did absolutely nothing. It took the next album, Ziggy Stardust, to make Hunky Dory happen.
Wait, Space Oddity was that just stuff that was recorded way before that came out after he was famous? Is that what happened?
No, Space Oddity, the single was big 3 or 4 years before we did Ziggy.
Right.
So that was it. It was just a one-off single.
Oh,
success.
Okay.
He didn't do anything else. He tried, but nothing else happened.
When did you start dressing up like, you know, with makeup and all that stuff?
If you see the album cover for Hunky Dory, he was into fashion very early on. There was a great picture in, I think it was the Daily Mirror, an English paper. It was either the Daily Mirror or the Sun. The front page showed a couple pushing a pram.
A what?
A pram.
A baby carriage.
A baby carriage.
Oh, okay.
A perambulator. And you see them from the back, and there's one with really long blonde hair, and the other one has really short hair. And you automatically assume that the one with the long hair is the mother, and the one with the short hair is the father. Then inside, they show it from the front, and it's David that has the long blonde hair, and it's Angie that has the really short hair. And he loved to play games like that.
You know, I do things. I don't know much about David Bowie other than the fact that I think his real name was David Jones, but
Yes.
he changed it because of Davy Jones and the Monkees.
Yes.
And the other one was that I saw him on a Bing Crosby special, singing Christmas songs with
Right.
Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
And he looked like a regular person. I mean, not like, you know,
Well,
made-up
a
person.
very, very thin regular person.
But he,
that
didn't,
was
but
during
he was
his thin
dressed
white
up even
Yeah.
more than a regular person. He was dressed up in a suit
Oh,
and
yes.
tie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was still theatrical. I mean, he always knew what the effect
yeah.
was going to be from what he selected.
Have you ever seen that clip with Bing
No,
Crosby and
no, I
David
haven't.
Bowie?
Little Drummer Boy was what he
Yeah.
sang.
Oh.
It's great. It's really
Yeah, it's
good.
really good.
Yeah.
Do you still think that he's not a massive talent, but just a
No,
good guy?
no, that changed very
Maybe
quickly.
he just got better.
He is probably the best vocalist I've ever worked with. Not necessarily from his vocal sound or anything like that, but from a performance standpoint. I did 4 albums as co-producer with him, and on those 4 albums, 95% of the vocal tracks that we did were first takes from beginning to end, which is unheard of. There'll always be punch-ins, or you'll do 7 tracks and you'll pick out the best bits of each, or with
Patrick Swayze.
yeah, that was a little harder. But these days, they won't. A lot of acts won't even sing the chorus more than once.
Yeah, I just did a song at
auto-tuned.
I just did a song
that.
at Brian's studio. It was just a song about Pinocchio, and I kept saying Pinocchio instead of Pinocchio, but it came around 3 times, and he kept taking the pin from the first one,
Right.
and the second one to the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very convenient if that's the kind of work
No,
you're
but
doing.
it's not a
Yeah.
performance. I'm sorry. It's.
What are you trying to say? Let's get back to the next act that you did after David Bowie.
Well, around the same time, I was also working with Elton just as engineer.
Oh, Elton John.
Yes.
How was he? As a
Yeah, I would
person?
like to know about the band and how the music felt. You know,
Well, it was
he's a
perfect.
good piano player too.
Oh,
right?
excellent. Yeah,
So
superb.
is that kind of where the groove came from?
It was all of them.
Yeah.
Look, it's always teamwork.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in teamwork. And I was lucky because I got to mix Madman Across the Water, which was the last big sort of orchestral one that he did. And he wanted a change, and it just so happened that he was this guy that done a little bit more rock and roll kind of thing, so it suited doing the next album. And he also wanted to do it in a different country, so we did it in France, and that was Honky Chateau. And then I
Did
also
you do that album too?
Yes.
Did you do the Rocket Man song?
Yes, I saw him write that in 10 minutes. He
In 10 minutes?
He wrote it in front of me, yeah. Well, in front of all of us.
But he wrote the
way it
music,
went,
I mean, you had the words already.
oh, yes.
Right.
The way it worked was, excuse me, I'm sorry. The way it worked was that Bernie Taupin, the lyricist, would go up to his room about 8 o'clock at night, come down to breakfast next morning with a whole stack of papers and give them to Elton. And these were lyrics he'd written last night. And Elton would go through them, yeah, I like that one. Yeah, maybe. And then he'd go over to the piano and pick one of them and start to do it. And he picked this one, Rocket Man, and within 10 minutes he had it all.
Do you remember how it started? I think it's going to be a long. We started with the other late night,
I can't remember.
Okay.
With Elton John, was he always playing a real piano, an acoustic, and singing simultaneously?
No.
He would just play the track, and you would overdub the
Yes.
vocal. Okay.
But he was fast. He wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't Bowie, but he was fast.
Yeah.
And who was after that? Supertramp?
I went on to produce Supertramp. Although before that, when we were over in France, either Elton or Gus, the producer, when we were having dinner, would put on a record. And their favourite at that time was a band called Mahavishnu Orchestra that I'd never heard of. And they'd put the Inner Mountain Flame on every dinner. And with all of the conversation going, I just caught snippets of this very strange music. And I thought, what are these guys? They sound as if they're completely out of their skulls. They're all in different studios, not knowing what each other's playing. It made no sense to me whatsoever. So get back to Trident and mixing the album, and I get a phone call from an A&R guy at CBS at the time, Sony now, that he said, John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra are coming over to England to do a TV show, and they would like to meet with you with regard to doing their next album. And it was, hang on, Mahavishnu Orchestra, that's the band that Elton and Gus were playing all the time. Can you send me a copy of their first album? And he said, sure. And it was sent over, and when I got home and sat down and listened to it, then I was absolutely blown away by them and went to see them do this TV show. And I think one of the things I said the other day was how Cobham was one of the loudest drummers I'd ever worked with. Well, the way this TV show came down, there was a sound check. They started full bore, and these guys suddenly came, it was for the BBC, these guys suddenly came running out with these meters. You're way too loud, you've got to turn down, you can't go up that loud. And John was just standing there, he said, okay. And he went and he turned down, they all turned down, and they did the sound check a lot quieter. And he said, now, you're not going to go above that for the show, are you? Oh, no, of course we won't. They came back out, and of course, as soon as they came out, everything got turned up full blast. Just the first chord, a cameraman from way up there suddenly fell off the camera. It was so loud, it just, oh my God.
So you produced a second album?
I engineered Birds of Fire. I then co-produced what became the Lost Trident tapes, and then I also did co-produce with John the new version of Mahavishnu Orchestra, which was Emerald Visions of the Pure Beyond, was the first album.
And then
and there was also Supertramp in the middle of all of that. Which
you're a pretty busy guy.
Oh, very. Yeah, Supertramp took about 6 months on and off, with other things thrown in.
How did you get to the missing persons? How did that happen?
Well, typical of the way my life has been, I move over to LA. I spend 3 months in LA recording the next Supertramp album, starting it off at A&M, and myself and my family loved LA. The sun, how could you not love it? Yeah, right. So we decided to move over. We rent a house. Now, I was finishing off an album at A&M during the day, so I dropped my family off at the house we were just about to rent, so that the gas and the phone and all of that could be turned on, and I go to the studio and leave them there. Finished at the studio at about 6 o'clock, drive back up there, expecting them to be there. There's no one. And I sit in the car, I'm getting more and more angry as time goes by. Where the hell are they? Suddenly there's on the window, I turn around and there's my eldest daughter with this other girl. And I wind down the window. Yes, what's going on? Where are you? She said, well, hey, Daddy, do you know someone called Frank Zappa? Yes. Well, this is his daughter, Moon. Oh, okay. He said, he lives just over there. We're all over there. So suddenly I'd moved in opposite Zappa. And, the whole of LA. And that's what happened. So I got friendly with them and the family, with him and the rest of the family.
What was he like? I mean, I know
he's exactly what you would think him. Brilliant and completely insane.
Okay.
Did your daughter turn into a valley girl?
A bit.
That's the legitimate question. Did she like shopping at the Galleria?
No.
Oh, okay.
But so you asked about missing persons. I went to see Frank play at UCLA Poly Pavilion once, and it was the first time he had, or at least the first time I saw him with Terry Bozzio.
The drummer.
And I was just in awe of Bozzio. He was amazing. And backstage afterwards, just saying how much I loved him and all that. Sometime later, one Saturday afternoon, get a phone call from Gail Zappa, Frank's wife, and she said, Terry, his wife Dale, and Frank's guitarist, Warren Cucurullo, are here. They've just formed a new band. Would you listen to it for them? I said, sure, send them down. We'd moved since then, since the original house, but we're still only about 10 minutes down the road. So they came down and played me what was probably the worst bunch of demos I'd ever heard in my life. It was terrible. But there was something, maybe just because I knew what Bozio was capable of, I took it further. I went to see them in rehearsal. We went into Frank's and recorded some demos and then tried to shop it, and no one was interested. No one wanted to sign them. So we put out our own record, funded by Warren's parents. Then we tried to get management for them. No one was interested. So I was basically looking after them. I was doing all the managerial duties. So I said to them, look, time to put up or shut up for me. I'd like to manage you, as no one else will. I know the music, I know what you're after and all of that. I think it would be perfect. They agreed, and I managed them through until the second album. And then they dumped everyone.
They dumped everyone as soon as they got really, really successful?
Yes. They thought they'd done it all themselves, and they soon realized they'd made a big mistake. But it's fine, because I've met them all since. Terry and I are close friends now. Warren and I are friends. Dale, we see each other.
Right.
That's the singer.
Yes, and Patrick, who was married to
Terry.
Yes, but they got divorced. And Patrick O'Hearn, who was the bass player, lives here in Nashville. So
let me ask you a question. Let's go back a little, because we didn't talk about the Beatles at all on this show. But we stopped at the Beatles, but we didn't go to the after career. You know, after they were Beatles. You recorded with John. You recorded some of his in like Cold Turkey.
Yes, I mixed Give Peace a Chance.
You mixed Give Peace.
Yes.
Wasn't that done live or something?
Well, it was recorded in Canada.
Hotel or something?
It was recorded by I can't remember the guy's name, but from Canada.
Was it recorded in a studio or like a...
No, I think it was a hotel room.
Yeah, with Tommy Smothers.
Yes, a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was recorded. Then John and Yoko brought it back, and I mixed it.
You mixed Give Peace a Chance?
Yes.
Recorded in a hotel room with their drums? And
No,
all
it was
that?
just sort of hitting.
When you
okay.
mixed it, did you mix it with people around, or you did it yourself? And
No, with John and Yoko were there, and I think Mal Evans or Neil Aspinall were there.
And they would say, raise this, lower this?
Oh yeah. Well, if you listen to the mix, there is a repeat on all the thumping, and as the song goes on, that repeat gets louder and louder, and that was, John wanted things constantly changing, so he was like, push it up more, push it up, kind of thing. So
did they ever mention anything about raising the vocals so you can hear the words, or lowering the vocals so you hear the words?
he hated his vocal.
So he wanted his vocal to be lowered down?
Well, and he wanted it affected.
He wanted it affected.
Yeah.
What about Cold Turkey? Tell me about that. That's a hard song to do. Were you there in the recording of that?
Yes, I recorded it and Phil McDonald mixed it. Yes.
Oh, so that's a lot of screaming in that song.
Yeah, John.
Who's done the screaming?
John.
No Yoko screaming in that song?
Not that I remember. No, it was just John. He was going through that primal scream therapy at that point, and
Cold Turkey has got me
on the run.
What about Instant Karma? Did you do that one?
No, that was done at EMI by Phil McDonald.
So the last time you did John Lennon was Cold Turkey?
No, I worked with him again very briefly. I went down to his house when he was doing starting off the Imagine album, and I was working on. In the afternoon, we did a track with Yoko, which I have no idea what that was called, which went very easily. Then in the evening, we started to do a song. I can't remember the exact title, but it's I Don't Want to Be a Soldier, Mama, I Don't Want to Go to War.
Yeah, I know that song.
Okay. And he taught it to the musicians that were there. And they were getting it. He said, okay, let's do a take. And before they went into the studio to do a take, chopped up several lines of cocaine, and they all snorted it and went into the studio and started to play. And it was terrible. They came in to listen to it, and they all, oh, that's awful, it's not happening. John, oh, I know how to make it better. More lines of blow, and they did it, went out, and it was even worse. They came back in, oh, we've got to do more. And after 3 takes, and that I knew it was going to go nowhere, I just turned around and said, sorry guys, I've got an early start in the morning, because this was way outside London. I've got an early start in the morning. I've got to go home. Bye, see you, good luck. And I left, and that was the last time I saw John.
Last time. What about this album, All Things Must Pass? Tell me about that. You had a lot to do with this album, right?
Well, I guess it was started off once again by Phil. We seem to go backwards and forwards on stuff. No, by Phil McDonald at Abbey Road. he would start things, I'd finish, I'd start things, he'd finish. There seemed to be a lot of that going on. But he started it, and then George came to Trident, because we had 16 track by then, and did a whole slew of overdubs and then mixing. And
it sounds very thick.
It was amazing. Number one, just working with George like that all the time was great.
You found him the easiest one to work with?
Oh yeah.
Not only just as a person, but to work with also.
Oh yeah, very easy. Phil Spector wasn't there at all during all of the overdubs. He would come by when we mixed. We'd sort of start off 2:30 in the afternoon, something like that, and George and I would get the mix going and get it the way we thought it should happen. Then Phil would come by 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, and he'd pass his comments, and sometimes we'd do what he said, and sometimes we wouldn't.
What did you think
then
of
he'd
Phil
leave.
Spector?
A nutter, complete nutter.
Nutter?
A complete nutter, yes.
What is that? What's that?
He's
for
insane.
Oh, insane. Good.
Yeah. There was one thing that at the time I just thought it was strange. It didn't. It's only in hindsight, with everything that happened with him, that I realised how bad the situation was. Sometime after doing that, George had written a song for Ronnie Spector called "Try Some Buy Some," and they'd recorded the track, and it was. They came to Trident and me to do the vocal, and we were doing it in the mix room upstairs, where there was a small overdub booth behind us. And Ronnie went in there, I had the mic set and got the level, and we started to do the takes. We did the first take, and there's George, Phil, and myself. And as soon as the tape finished, Phil started to tell a story. And this story went on for about 20 minutes, and Ronnie is just standing there by the mic, not saying a word. He finishes the story, talk back. Okay, Ronnie, you know, that was great. Can we just get a little more feeling on the first chorus? Yes, Phil. We'd do a take, and as soon as it was finished, Phil went into another story. So another 20 minutes, and she's just standing there, perfectly quiet, not saying a word, until he pulls the door. Yeah, much better. Now we need the same kind of thing on the third verse. Okay, Ronnie. Okay, Phil.
He was a nutter.
And no, but it was, she was so scared of him, she would not say anything. It was, she had to stand there and just speak when spoken to. That was it. Oh.
So you probably did do that murder.
Well, there's a long way between your wife being petrified of you and actually killing someone.
Not that far. Not that far. I've dealt with it before. There's all these stories are in this book.
Yep.
Called Abbey Road to Ziggy Stardust, written by, who's that other guy? Ken Scott and Bobby, how do you say it?
Osinski.
So the S is a Z? Can you get that? Oh, you're right. Osinski, okay. You got that? Get a picture of it? There we go. Abbey Road to Ziggy Stardust.
Have you stayed in touch with Jeff Emmerich? Interesting question. I can see by your face.
No. Unfortunately, we used to be very close, but after I was very, very upfront on the internet about what I thought about his book, no, he won't speak to me now.
Oh, okay.
Well, what did you feel about his book?
I wasn't aware of this. Tell me what you think.
Okay, I'll tell you one part of it.
Brian read the whole book.
Yeah, okay. There is a story in there. I recorded the first Jeff Beck album, Truth. There's a track, Old Man River, that Keith Moon came in to play timps on. And Mooney used to have this Rolls Royce that had a PA system on the top and this microphone that he could switch on at a moment's notice, for whatever reason. So the session finishes, and he's pulling out of the car park of Abbey Road Studios, and there's this little old woman happens to step in front of the car as she's walking her dog. He immediately picks up the mic, turns it on, and is cussing and swearing, blasting the whole place out like you would not believe. EMI had more complaints about that night than they'd ever had before, and they'd had a lot of complaints. Well, I happened to tell Howard Massey, the co-writer of Jeff's book, that story because I was interviewed for Jeff's book, and I was told after my interview I told that story to Howard, And guess what? That story finished up in Jeff's book, only it was John Lennon that pulled out, and Jeff saw the whole thing.
Oh.
It was John rather than Keith Moon.
Hmm.
He just changed it because it was a more interesting copy for the book.
But he saw the whole thing, not Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah.
He took credit for what he saw. Took his story.
It's that kind of thing. Like just the only person that looks good in that book is Paul. Yeah. The way he went on about George Martin, George Harrison, Chris Thomas, just it completely recording the White Album. He says how terrible it was, how everyone was at each other's throats. They weren't. I double checked for this book because I wanted to make sure that my memories, I wasn't just looking at it incorrectly. I spoke to Chris Thomas, George's assistant. I spoke to John Smith, the second engineer. And I said, how were the White Album sessions? They were great. They were so much fun. And they were. We had a blast. Every now and again, even in a 2-week project, the artistic temperament will just rise up and someone will get mad. Right. That's in a 2-week session. In 6 months, that's going to happen from time to time. Right. So you've got to expect it. And that's what it was. They weren't at each other's throats the entire time. It was just every now and again that artistic temperament.
This sounds like a great book to read. Abbey Road to Ziggy Stardust, and all those stories are in there, from the Beatles to David Bowie to Supertramp, Missing Persons, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page.
Yep.
Who else is
Jackie DeShannon, Stanley Clarke.
Anything in there about the Rolling Stones? We're out of time, but
yes, I think there is.
And Rolling Stones and all the classic stuff that we never knew about.
Pink Floyd.
And here's the guy right there, Ken Scott. And with
you had to look at that to see my name.
Look at the other guy's name. Bobby Ozinski. Ozinski. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay. Abbey Road to Ziggy Stardust. Anyway, we got to get going. My name is Jesse Goldberg. This is Brian Cumming, and this is Ken Scott. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Mind Your Own Music Business.